Welcome back, everybody. I've been doing some heavy-duty cleaning the last couple of days. And since I was down anyway, waiting on that new clutch release bearing to put the torque tube together, I decided to delve into everything that was required to put back wheels on. So the worst part of these jobs for me is cleaning up these heavy-duty wheel centers. I don't know how IH did it, but they gave each one of these a surface area that's like 5 times greater than its mass. Each one of these is equivalent to cleaning an entire barn. The whole thing, not just the broadside, all sides. So we went around and around, got both sides of these cleaned up, ready to go. I also started filling the bench with axle clamps and the bolts and the rim clamps and the bolts and the nuts for those. I've got some other new hardware on the way. Did a drawbar pull bracket while I was at it. And then luckily the new bearing for the clutch showed up. So that means we've got a lot of stuff ready to put together. And also the recent LeSueur, Minnesota swap meet finds. I'll go through it one more time in case some of the regular viewers to the Preparation H project did not watch the swap meet episode. I found the style of seat I was looking for. Happy about that. Hoods. I came home with 2 of them. This is the dedicated gasoline hood like I wanted, that has a bit of a worn out exhaust pipe hole that I can repair. But then I found this perfect in every way distillate style hood. It still has that second hole right there that I don't need. But honestly, man, I just like everything else about this hood. I couldn't leave it down there for the money. So I came home with 2 of them. I like options. I either repair the exhaust opening for the gasoline hood and go with that, or gosh, I don't know. I think I'm going to patch that extra starting gasoline tank hole on the distillate hood and go with this one because it's just perfect all the way around. It's even better than the distillate hood that I had on this. So happy about all that. New PTO shield for the money. I decided to pick it up because mine has had a couple of these mounting brackets that have been broken and welded. I was going to dress all those up for 30 bucks. This one doesn't need anything. I decided to go with it. I also picked up a new crossbar for the lights because mine had been re-welded in these places a couple of times and had way too much metal on it. This thing was a good buy. Also, I picked up a new air cleaner because mine had that great big dent right on the front of it, and you can see how something's landed on this at one point and kind of crunched the top down a little bit. That's what they're supposed to look like. So much further ahead just picking that one up as well. And the biggest surprise on the weekend, these IH front wheel weights. They will fit CHM, also 300, 350, 400, and the like. I may have left out a couple models, but you get the picture. And not only did I find 1 set, I found 2 sets. There's 4 weights here total. Not an easy thing to run across. They mount with those 3 through holes into these 3 threaded holes in the front wheel centers, and you can also double them up if you wish. Pretty pumped about that because I've been wanting some front weights to have on an H for a while, just for looks. But now that I'm narrowing the tread width up on this tractor, I think they'll serve a good purpose for getting a little bit more weight a little further down, making things a little bit more stable. There have been a couple of calls in the comment section for me to warn people about the tipping hazards with a narrow tread tractor. I personally get pretty cavalier about such matters because I believe that ought to be common sense. If you narrow anything up, it is going to become more unstable. It's not my place to tell people things that should just be common knowledge. Not trying to be crass about it, but that's, if you narrow up a tractor, drive it accordingly. If you flipped it over, you made a wrong choice somewhere. Now we've got all that out of the way, let's start getting some of this stuff off of the floor. It's getting hard to walk around back here. There we are, started on the axle. So these are just going on temporarily because I'm going to do the same with the H that I did with the Super M when I painted it. And that is just throw the wheel cylinders on temporarily and then let the tractor just sit down on the floor right on them. And we will wheel the chassis in and out on the wheel centers. It's going to be a low rider, but it rolls just fine. And that helps us to get it outside, get the chassis painted. There we are, we're setting on this point. We can get the chassis painted and then roll it back in, take the wheel centers back off again, and then we can just paint the wheel centers and the wheel parts, and everything just rolls and moves so much easier that way. And we'll start with them all the way out on the axles as far as we can get. Gives us more room to get in here and paint all of this stuff without them being in the way. These clamp bolts are still red because these are not the ones that I'm going to use. These are just the ones I'm going to use right now. This side is a lot tighter working because of that shelf right next door, but it doesn't take many times of doing this to learn. Position the keyways right up and down. That's going to make your life a lot easier. It's on the floor. All right, we can begin work on the torque tube now. That's set up, ready to go. Off camera, I got the new release bearing put onto the carrier. We're still going to keep this, we'll call it an old one. It doesn't have a lot of hours on, but I put it on a while back, but it's still pretty good, so we will retain that for possible future use. Sometimes pieces like that can come in handy. And to load the torque tube, we will put this piece in. It's a pot metal release bearing carrier, also kind of acts as a guide for the input shaft. You have to watch them. This one's in good shape, and of course release bearing on the carrier, release fork, release shaft, and the input shaft too. And once again, we will be going through this rather quickly because all of this Farmall H stuff has already been done on YouTube several times. Nothing proprietary here. They're all the same. These little washers are what key that fork to the release shaft. And then the bolts drop through and clamp it all together. Clutch pedal return spring next hooks into an eyelet up there and goes into this peg right here. And to finish it all off, I'll preload the input shaft because it won't go in from the front without taking all that input stuff apart. And if we put this onto the back end, we won't get it in from the back either. So now's definitely the time. One thing I do like about these H's, the M's of this time, most other internationals, these alignment dowels drift in and out relatively easily, and they're threaded on the end. A 5/8 nut, I believe it's 5/8 by 11 coarse thread, will take them right out. Just start a nut on there and you can pull those right out. It makes separating the joints a lot easier, and it also makes aligning everything a lot easier because I just go and like start all these bolts. I don't tighten anything, and then I go and tap those alignment dowels in and then tighten the bolts. Really easy, really simple. On these H's, these bottom two bolt holes are blind holes because the oil level's about right there, but the two above them are open, and the two on the upper corners are open as well. So I do put thread sealer on those two and these two up top. And this is as far as we go for now on the back end until we get primer and paint on this whole kind of middle section. All right. And fun fact time, this is when the H starts looking really long and slender. They made the torque tube on the H's longer than it needed to be. Like you take a look at a torque tube on a Farmall M, it's probably about that long right there, okay? But the reason for the difference is they wanted all of the attachment holes for the tractor mounted implements to correspond Farmall H to Farmall M. That way, the same implements could be used on either tractor. So that's why this thing is just, you know, so long, all right? So aside from some masking of some strategic areas where I don't want to get primer and paint, like there and like there, what have you, that's really about as far as we go with this. I've been keeping the rag over the belt pulley drive opening just to keep dust, dirt, and tools out of there. So now that we're finished with the back 2/3, we start looking at the front 1/3. The first order of business is to get the rest of the wiring harness off of the engine. I only had a couple of connections like at the generator, down at the coil. Otherwise, all the rest of this was just draped on there anyway. Grill next. Do the old pedestal job next. That's greasy. Just how I like it. That wasn't hand tight either. I did loosen that before I turned the camera on. I've never been a super fan of how IH ran the steering shafts through these top radiator tanks, but it made it all fit, and they did it to a lot of them. Get this cross brace out of here. So I drained down the antifreeze, and found a place to put that. I loosened all the hose connections, and we've got the fan shroud just sitting in there, and the radiator mounting bolts are loose down below. So I'm going to get the radiator out of the way. Trying to be very careful with this because this core was brand new. Oh, about 10 years ago. And now we can get the fan shroud out of our way. And now we're coming down to the last few items for today. We're just about finished in the shop, but I can remove the gauge panel and the generator. Now, because the generator belt is captured behind the fan belt, we might as well just remove both of them, get them right out of the way. And also, this is where it's really nice that the last guy that was in here made sure that this adjustable water pump pulley sheave was nice and free, because it sure makes detensioning the belt so much easier when everything just moves. Fan belt off first, and should be able to snake it through. Yep, get around the blades. Generator off. Generator belt, sorry, off next. Finally, to finish out the day, I've decided to remove the distributor and the coil and the distributor drive. It'll just open this side of the engine up that much more. We don't take anything else off beyond this until we can get some of this stuff clean. So I'm not worried about anything going in the drive end right here. It's pretty well blocked off. So this will be the last thing for today. Long-winded bolt down here. There, we got it. And that'll do it. Okay, everybody, not a bad day's work in the shop. Back end is ready for primer and paint. We are digging into the front end so that we can do the minor refreshments that are needed on the engine and then get into the loose vertical shaft on that front bolster for the front wheels. We've cleaned the bench off once again, at least most of the way. We're pretty much down to bell housing bolts, the PTO engagement lever bracket, and a bunch of rim clamp hardware for the back wheels. So that's going to do it for today. I'll get that engine block cleaned up. We can work on getting the exhaust manifold, intake exhaust manifold off, governor, carburetor, thermostat housing, oil filter, and whatever else seems like it might need it. The flywheel and the clutch and everything are going to stay in place because that was a new clutch and pressure plate and flywheel grind about 200 hours ago. It's giving me no issues at all, so we're not going to open that can of worms. Thank you for watching, everyone. Hope to see you all back for the next installment.